And so I'd like to welcome to the stage Chris Bennett.
Well, not a whole lot of people here today, but you know, it's funny. I was first started coming to SFU and speaking at these types of events when Dana Larson, who's heading up the Sensible BC campaign, was the head of the League for Ethical Action of Drugs in like 1990. So great to be still, you know, well, it's not so great to be still be coming here. I would have hoped we'd had legalization by now. But it's looking better than ever, you know. I've been a pot activist for 23, 24 years. And I really feel that we've reached the summit of that, and now we're starting to coast down the other side, and that things like the legalization in Colorado, legalization in Washington, are pivotal turning points in the movement to legalize cannabis, and that legalization in North America is an inevitable reality that, you know, although people like Harper are trying to put the brakes on, it's just going to happen, and they better get used to it. Those people in Washington and Colorado, they're not going to turn back the clock on what's happened there, and they've gotten pretty used to the legalization, and the federal government's going to have to get on board. And I bet you next federal election in the U.S. that legalization's on the table in the platforms for the candidates running. Here in Canada, you know, we've just seen all the laws get a lot harsher under the Harper regime, so we've got a fair bit of a struggle here, but hopefully with this, I don't know how many people are aware of Sensible BC, but hopefully people get on board with that here in BC, and we can push that envelope here a little bit. I was asked to speak about the role of cannabis in religion, and in that regard, cannabis is older. You know, the use of cannabis as a sacrament, religious purposes, ritual use of cannabis is older than any existing religion. We know from archaeological finds of a cannabis censer from the Ukraine region that for at least 5,500 years, people have been burning cannabis for ritual purposes. And some of even the oldest existing religions still use cannabis. Cannabis was used in China going back to about 2700 BC, but it was a major player in the development of the Taoist religion, where they used cannabis to contact spirits and also as a tool for longevity. In India, cannabis is used as a sacrament to Lord Shiva, who's the longest continuously worshipped god on earth. His worship goes back to the Stone Age, and Shiva is the lord of bong, bong being a cannabis preparation, a drink preparation of cannabis. And even today, thousands of years later, you can go to India and take a walk along the Ganges River, and you'll see sadhus smoking chillum pipes of charas, which is hashish, in honor of Lord Shiva. And cannabis in India is also used in rituals to the goddess Kali, and even Vishnu and Krishna and other deities, in the holy festival where they throw colored paint on each other in a riotous party. Bong is drunk by most of the participants. So there in India, it's been used for thousands of years for ritual use, and although the British Raj tried to quell that, it's always managed to kind of maintain, and there's been a real resurgence in this recognition of this plant in India. And in Africa, cannabis has been used by all sorts of different tribes along the Congo region. The Bianyarwanda, the sons of hemp, use cannabis, referring to it as moyo, meaning both life and hemp, and greet each other with a greeting, meaning both life and hemp. Pygmies in Africa say they have been smoking cannabis since the dawn of time, and that God gave the Pygmies cannabis so that they would be healthy and happy. You know, of course, the Rastafarian religion developed in Jamaica, and it's, you know, these people's religious rights are being prevented here. They're not allowed to partake of their cannabis, which they use as a sacrament, and they believe it goes back to the biblical tradition, and there's some evidence that there's some truth to this. In the 1930s, a Polish etymologist and anthropologist, Sula Bennett, said there were these Hebrew terms, cannabosum and canna, that were actually references to cannabis that were mistranslated when the ancient Hebrew texts were converted to the Latin. And in the first of these references, you know, God, who first appears to Moses in flames of fire from within a burning bush, commands Moses to make this holy anointing oil with about 9 pounds of this cannabosum, which he says is cannabis, mixed with myrrh, cinnamon, and other ingredients into about 1.5 gallons of olive oil. And every time that Moses is to speak to the Lord, he covers himself in this oil, which is extremely rich in THC, and your skin's a big organ, and THC can actually penetrate through it with these oils. And he would also place some of this oil on the altar of incense, and he would speak to the Lord on the pillar of smoke over the altar of incense. The pillar of smoke is actually referred to as the Shekinah and represented the physical presence of God in the temple. So God's not in the temple with Moses unless there was smoke pouring out of the tent of the meeting. So when you throw cannabis into that scenario, it really radically changes, a lot for fundamental religions. If it makes Moses like a shaman or witch doctor who uses cannabis in order to invoke the word of God. And we know that this type of activity took place with cannabis in the ancient world from Assyrian and Babylonian references to cannabis under the name Kanabu. And these references refer to topical preparations used in order to open one's ear for God. And the items for the sacred rites, according to Assyrian inscriptions, were cannabis, odorous plants, honey, and water. So we see pretty clearly that this was an actual preparation used nearby at the time of cannabis. And as well, the Sikhs, the Nihang Sikhs, who are the guardians of the Sikh tradition, sacred warrior guardians of Sikh tradition, they partake of cannabis under the name Sukadun, which means it's a holy sacrament of their religion. And Sikhs up into the more recent times were drinking cannabis, although smoked cannabis is forbidden to the Sikh members. So going back thousands of years, cross-culturally, in numerous faiths, in Judaism, in Hinduism, in Sikhism, in Taoism, even Buddhism. There's legends of the Buddha that he sat under the Bodhi tree for 5 years before announcing his philosophy, and he subsided on one cannabis seed a day for a number of weeks while he was in meditation. So even in the Buddhist religion and later Tibetan Buddhism and Tantric Buddhism, cannabis is used in a number of rites in order to put one's self in touch with the Buddha nature, and also as a tool for longevity. And in regards to longevity, it's interesting the science that's coming up on cannabis. Many of these ancient people knew of many of these medical applications that we're just kind of rediscovering today for cannabis. And ancient texts like the Arya Veda, the source of Indian medicine, refers to cannabis for all sorts of ailments that are being prescribed today for medical reasons, as well as the Pen Tasao in China going back to 2700 BC, again referring to cannabis for all sorts of ailments that it's used for today. And in many of these cultures, it was regarded as a tool for longevity, and actually cannabis is an antioxidant. The U.S. government actually holds a patent on cannabis for its antioxidant property. And the oldest woman who ever lived, Phula Nayak, who lived to be 126 in India, she actually attributed her long life to her daily use of cannabis. So there's so much that we're rediscovering about this plant. It's a very useful plant. And not only are people's medicinal access to this plant being hampered by over-stringent regulation, and people are being persecuted. Young people are having their lives ruined both here and in the United States of America by being saddled with cannabis charges. And in the U.S., you can't even get a student loan if you've been busted for cannabis, so it can really ruin a person's life. It prohibits people's travel. Right now, just going across the border, people are getting turned back without even a criminal record just by answering the question from a border guard, have you ever tried cannabis? Yeah, I tried cannabis. That can get you a lifetime ban from the United States right now, and that's happening. So there's like a tremendous amount of injustice being directed at this plant, and in regard to religious use, there's, as I mentioned, groups like the Rastafarians or the Church of the Universe, which has been in Canada since 1969, which use cannabis as a sacrament, that are being denied this right, although they've gone through the courts and documented it as part of their religion, documented its historical role in religion. But I would say that, the prohibition of cannabis all round is much greater than any sort of religious freedom issue, because what it's really about is, it's like our right to air and water. Our right to plants is a fundamental natural right. And this is life on earth, man. And when we're talking about cannabis, we're talking about a plant that we've had a relationship with for anywhere from at least 12,000 years, but based on the latest archaeological research and the discovery of tools used in the decortation of hemp that go back to 35,000 years. We're probably talking about a plant that humanity's had a relationship with for tens of thousands of years. Some scientists like Dr. Jeffrey Guy from GW Pharmaceuticals have speculated that cannabis may have actually played an important role in the time period as what's known as the Great Leap Forward, when things like the wheel, fire, and major human discoveries all took place, and that cannabis's way of increasing novel thinking and new idea associations may have facilitated this Great Leap Forward. So this, although that, generally even here at a major university in Vancouver, although it's not generating a lot of attention at this time, it certainly deserves it. And hats off to you students who put this event together, and hopefully we can garner the attention this issue needs in future such meetings. So thanks a lot, and hopefully I'll see you all 420.